Etepu, assalamu alaikum, namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasankma Keperu with another exciting video for you. And today we have a very, very interesting subject which is going to dive into a controversial issue. What color were the ancient Egyptians and why does it matter? Really? Why is it such a big deal? All right, so we're going to cover that. But before I get into this, I want you to hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel if it's your first time watching. And if you're able to contribute to us, become a Patreon supporter. We need more. There are some things that we're trying to do, like for 2019, we're trying to produce a movie. And the movie is about controlling and manipulating reality. And it's going to give a breakdown of how to do that. It's kind of like What the Bleep Do We Know? You guys remember that movie? And that other one they did where they tried to just, it was a cash grab, just make money and run. The Secret, yeah, which everybody fell for, you know. So if you can become a Patreon supporter, that would really help us to fund that. And also, I am going to be writing, or I am writing a new ebook, which is on the same subject matter of, basically it's a breakdown of the technique of manipulating reality and how you can incorporate it into your mundane day-to-day life. Very simplistic techniques, and you know, I think it's going to be revolutionary in the sense that too many gurus have made this seem so complex, and it's a magic or a power you already possess. All right, so really it doesn't need to be all that mystical and all that, right? Okay. So let me get started. I see that the Magi's have already entered the chat room. And I think I've enabled the Super Chat. So if you want to donate through Super Chat, you can do that. It's be my first time using that. So that will be interesting. Okay, let me see. Now, all right. For a very long time, the question of the ancient Egyptians, specifically their background, has been in question, you know. And I want to introduce, to start out with, you know, because I think if I guys do something that's very visual, you guys will get it. So let's start out by this. There was an article that was recently went out there that talked about the ancient Egyptians, okay? So the article was saying scientists mapped the genome of the ancient Egyptian kings and they weren't from Africa. Ooh. You guys didn't see when I did my ooh. Let me do it again. Ooh. Okay, so let's go back to this, okay? Now, the first ever genetic analysis of mummies found that the ancient Egyptian kings were more closely related to West Asians than Africans, according to a study published Tuesday by scientists at the Max Planck Institute. The research found that ancient Egyptians were most closely related to Neanderthalic, Levantine, whatever, and European populations. The mummies tested did not share strong genetic links to African, often found in modern Egyptians. This suggests that an increase in the sub-Saharan African gene flow into Egypt occurred within the last 1,500 years, Wolfgang Hack, who led the research team, said in a statement. Okay. So, basically, what they're saying is, hey, we've done this DNA test that conclusively prove, notice the terminology they're using now, the ancient Egyptian, what is it, kings, didn't say the population, the kings were not from Africa. Okay? This is what they said now. All right? Very interesting, very interesting. And there have been published articles on the same note, which again tried to reinforce the idea that the ancient Egyptians were white, okay, or of European descent. Let me say that, European descent, okay. Let me not mince. What is the term saying? Confuse words or whatever. Now, many people, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I did a video several months back about the unveiling of Queen Nefertiti, okay? And it was done on TV. And what they did was they took a bust of her, and they had reconstruction done. And what it turned out to be is that she looked very European, okay? On the left side is the reconstruction of her. And this was done on, I forgot, it was like one of these morning television shows. And it caused an uproar, you know. The uproar was about how people were saying that it's not really authentic. There's two controversies. Number one, the original bust that was found is very controversial because they say it's not real, it's not authentic, and there's really good reason to believe that. The other thing is that they cherry picked, and I'll explain what I mean by that, which is a common tactic that they use. Okay. But let's take a look at this. Just take a look at it closely and see what we got here. If I can get this coming up there. Please tell me it comes up. And I've got a commercial. Okay. Okay. So let's let that commercial play, and because I want to actually I want to show you the real deal here. Now, okay, let's look at it this way. We know as a fact that Egypt is located in Africa, is located in Northeast Africa, okay? Now, I want you to consider this. This gentleman, Josh Gates, is supposed to be a recognized scholar and authority on the subject. Yet he has not gone into the discussion about the bust being a phony from which he was able to reconstruct the image of Nefertiti. All right. And now when I said cherry picking, what I mean by cherry picking, you have these individuals who will come along and they will show you these oddities of what the Egyptians should look like. So in other words, instead of showing the Egyptian people as the masses of the people of what they look like, the masses of the population, they tend to look for the skulls and the mummies that have European features, which primarily are from the later kingdoms, when Kemet or Egypt was doing its trade with Greece and Rome, and it was already a cosmopolitan. All right, it was a mixture of people. But if you now go back to going way back to the beginning of Egypt, and you go throughout, you will start to see that the color is very different. But I want to go back to this because I think this is really important that you guys see this. Okay, now look at the words he used: dead on, extremely accurate. And if you look at her skin, it's very pale. Look at the eye color. Look at that. It's a light eye color. So this is very, very interesting. Now, the one thing I want to talk about this is they especially did this during Black History Month. And what you're seeing here is nothing but propaganda. It's their way of inciting racial tension. Because this is exactly what they want to do and claim a civilization that's not theirs. All right, and they know fully well the truth, but this propaganda is important because those people who watch the movie The Ten Commandments, they watch all these other movies, and Hitler said it best, you know, a lie, if you keep repeating a lie, it becomes the truth in people's mind and the psychology of people's mind. All right, so there's that propaganda arm that always has to come out with these lies. Now, we know that when you start looking at the development of two major civilizations, and we're talking Africa and Europe, that the climate dictates, there's a form and function relationship, the climate dictates, according to Ma'at, what a people or peoples will look like. And that is because you are adapted to the environment. A hot tropical or very hot desert environment produces melanated individuals. Melanin is the pigmentation in your skin. A colder climate like in the Caucasus Mountains of Europe produces less melanated skin, less vitamin D, because you need to absorb as much sunlight as possible. Okay, and in Europe during that development, there was not a lot of sunlight. All right, now I can go all the way back, and we can talk about there was a supercontinent called Pangaea that first developed, and then the continents started to shift and they started to separate. But I'm not going to go into all of that. All right, but what we're going to talk about is that this propaganda that's meant to incite racial strife. This is what they do. They tend to divide and conquer. And the best way to do that is to put one racial group above the other and then tell that racial group, you're better than the ones below you. Now, the issue that I have is that a lot of times when we see individuals who are well-meaning and they're teaching about the situation where we have what they would say is this, there's not enough tolerance, or you know, there's this making it seem like there's this war between the races. But the thing that you have to keep in mind, there is a hidden hand, someone above the Wizard of Oz who is pulling the strings behind the curtain. So even though you have to, you can say that, hey, you know what, the white people are the problem, and white people look at black people as if black people are the problem. But what you're missing is the bigger picture, is this who's pulling the strings, because you have been duped through to mass media propaganda to believe in something that is not true. And I'm going to go into the idea of a pendulum and an ergomore, and so we can understand where did this come from and how did this start. All right. Now, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is that when the first European explorers went into Egypt, and there was Howard Carter and Napoleon, all these guys went into Egypt. It was unfortunate that these individuals, these racist individuals, were in control or had direct access to all of the antiquities of Egypt. So they had access to the Medunetta, the sacred texts. They had access to the tombs. They had access to the pyramids. And they were able to interpret this information, being that they were left brain. Europeans are left brain thinkers. Africans are right brain thinkers. They were able to interpret this, or should I say misinterpret this information, in a way where it was basically cold and dry information. It was facts, dates, and things of that nature. But not only that, they came to a startling realization that when they looked into the tombs and read the sacred Metunetta, they began to realize fairly quickly that these were black Africans. So then came a concerted effort to kind of hide the information about the origin of the ancient Egyptians who we call their true name is the ancient Kamau, and I'll get into that. But first, I want to bring your attention to something very important here, all right? And let's see if you guys can grasp this. Oh, I hate when it does that. Stand by, technical difficulties. All right, there we go. This man, Dr. Zeha Hawass. Now, he originally was the Minister of State Antiquities for Egypt, Cairo. This man has told so many lies and covered up information that would give us vital information to the origins of the ancient Kemetic people, the ancient Egyptians. In fact, there are charges against him and the things that he have done. We have this man on video lying, telling outright lies about the origin of the ancient Egyptians. So when I say things like, it is unfortunate that all the artifacts are in the hands of these racists, this is what I'm talking about, okay? Individuals like this man, all right? So let's go on. Now, let me bring your attention to these two individuals. Same thing, crooks. And I'm sorry to be passionate about this. This is Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon. These individuals raided the tomb, they're grave robbers, of King Tut, took out the artifacts, and now some of it is missing, some of it is in museums. Now, there's evidence that is coming out to say that these Howard Carter falsified the opening of the tomb, meaning this was pre-set up. It was all set up so that he can gain a place in the history books as the one who found King Tut's tomb. All right, so you can Google that and search that, but we're now starting to understand that that was a phony dig, and the excavation, everything was a stage show. Okay, now let's move on. We have seen what they have revealed to be the ancient Queen Nefertiti. Now, this is the hieroglyphics, the sacred writing, the Metu Neta. This is what the Egyptians drew of themselves and what they look like, okay? And I think this is from the temple of Heru Hathor, Egyptian women. And we notice the melanin, which is necessary to survive in a hot desert climate. Now, something important I want to draw your attention to as you're looking at these hieroglyphics. Again, can you see here where you have the male, the female by his side, and it looks like he's got an afro. Like, it looks like he's from the 70s, you know what I mean, the disco era. But anyway, dark hue, okay, that is definitely not white. That's not Elizabeth Taylor, okay? And the same thing with his mate. Now, I said I was going to bring your attention to something very, very important. I want you to look at the jaw structure of the Egyptian women here. Look at their jaw structure. Can you see that? Let's go back to the close-up, all right? Jaw structure. This is what's called this prognostism, okay? Now, this is a clear indication of African feature. Now, look at this. You have Caucasian, prognosticism, you have African, and you have Asian. Africans, as a people, have a large protruding, let's say it again, protruding jaw. And that is very, very well known. Okay? Going back to the Egyptian women, you can see it within them. Okay? Can you see it? And there you go. Okay, now I want to talk about this, okay? Now, when I spoke earlier about cherry picking, you notice, going back to the video that we saw of Queen Nefertiti, all right, what they conveniently did was pick a woman that had European features, okay? And again, that bust is in question. We don't know if that's authentic. There were a number of other busts that they could have picked, but they picked that one specifically, all right? Now, in that video, they also pointed to Akhenaten, that's his name, which is Queen Nefertiti's husband, his mother, okay, Queen T. Now, notice how they did not show Queen T, okay? And they did that for a reason. And I'm going to show you this right here so you can get the point of why they didn't show it. This is a bust of Queen T as the ancient Egyptians, you know, her royal court put this together of her. This is what she truly looked like. Now, are you guys... are you ready for a shock? Are you ready for a shock? Let's get a shock here. All right, here it comes. Here it comes. Big surprise. Oh my God! Oh my God! She has the protruding jaw. Oh no! Whoa! Kasak, are you saying that she is African? She's black African? Absolutely. But then why didn't they show her? Well, because that phony bust that they had of Queen Nefertiti would legitimize their lie as to the ancient Kemetic or Kamau people were white when they were not. Now, may I break this down? Okay, can we do this? Egypt, the ancient Egyptians called it Kemet. Kemet. It's also known as Tai Mary. The ancient Egyptian people called themselves Kamau. Kamau, all right? Note that is important because Kam, the K-A-M, is the etymological root of the Hebrewic term Hamend. I think it was the black son of Noah, meaning black, Kam, black, okay? So we know that the ancient Egyptians were referring to themselves as a black people, all right? But I want to read just a little clause from the Metu Neter Volume 1 by Ra'u Nefa Amen. You guys should get this. And the ancient Egyptians called their country Kemet, land of the blacks, and themselves Kamau, black people. This can explain why of all races the black has been referred to since ancient times by the color of their skins, Negroes, from the Latin negroi, meaning black. If it were natural to do so, we would find that other people would be referred to in similar manner. Instead, all other people of antiquity are referred to by the name of their nation. White people call blacks black because the Kemetian people started the whole thing by thus calling themselves the Kamau, meaning black. Their paintings and sculptures of themselves testify to this fact that they were of black Negroid race. All right. Now, he goes on to cite further examples. But now, one of the things that I want to talk about is the Herodotus, known as the father of history, the Greek historian. Now, Herodotus he had an eyewitness account, who is white, of what the ancient Egyptians looked like. And he clearly said that they were of black skin complexion. In fact, in one of the chapters, he talks about an Egyptian woman looking rather black, okay? And he referred, well, let me just go into this chapter because I think it's really pertinent to what we're talking about. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so he refers to dove, and he calls the dove black like the Egyptians. And I can't find it. Well, that's great. Okay. Egyptians. So I'll have to get that. All right. But anyway, so in any event, he goes on at length to talk about what they look like, how they lived. Okay. And he cites the color of their skin. Okay. Now let's go to Akhenaten here. Now, this is Akhenaten, Amenhotep. all right, and husband of Nefertiti. Now, the one thing that they talk about, and by the way, Akhenaten and Nefertiti almost let Kemet, Egypt, open to foreign invasion. You'll hear a lot about monotheism. And Akhenaten believed and he worshipped what they call as the sun god, Aten. And it was that religious belief that led him to lead a group from Kemet in an exodus to form like his own commune. And he demilitarized Kemet almost to the point, again, of being open to foreign invasion, because he, in some books, he's known as the pacifist. Okay? So what I want to say there is that Nefertiti and Akhenaten are not really important individuals in the large scheme of Egyptian history. But why are they being shown so much to lend credence to the idea that the ancient Egyptians were of European descent, specifically Nefertiti? They have to do that. And again, they parade this bust around of her because it exemplifies white female beauty. But again, there were 3 separate busts of her, okay? Keep that in mind. And they chose this one. Now, we talked about prognosticism, right? Now let's go on to the Sphinx. What are we looking at here? We're looking at the same protruding of the jaw. So what I'm trying to show you is this whole idea of them being of European origin does not vibe with science, okay? Because we know, looking at this from a scientific perspective, that and in no way could they be of European descent. But one of the things, the arguments that they made was, they say, well, they migrated from Europe to Africa, settled there, built the pyramids, and built the civilization, all right? Well, I don't see how that's possible, you know, because let's take a look at here. This is one of the first step pyramids built by the pharaoh Dozier, or Zoser. And he commissioned Imhotep to build this step pyramid. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we can track the progress of the step pyramids from soot or dirt to using the stone, and finally what you get is the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, when you go back into Central Africa, let's put it this way, starting from south to north, if we take that long journey, we can see how they were progressively learning and adapting to building pyramids from south to north, from south to north, okay? Very important. So if you're talking about a migration of Europeans to Africa, and you're saying that they settled in Northeast Africa, which is Egypt, then how come we're seeing step pyramids going from south all the way to Northeast Africa? If they had settled into Kemet, Northeast Africa, we would see all indications there of their trials and errors in trying to build those pyramids. So this gives them away. But not only that, the ancient Kemetic people told us where they were from. And this is from the papyrus of Hunefer. And it was written in the Hieratic writings. We came from the beginning of the Nile where God happy dwell, at the foothills of the mountain of the moon. Now, what they're saying is Kilimanjaro in Kenya. And what they're saying is they came from Central East Africa, within Africa, following the Nile to the north, from the south to the north. So this is clearly an indication of their origin and them trying to tell us how they came about. But every time we see these writings in these works, they always interject footnotes into the publications, which say, well, they didn't really mean that they came from south to north. It just means that their lifeblood depended on the Nile and the inundation of the Nile. So, okay, so, oh, really, is that the case? So you don't want to read them literally, but they do want to read them literally when it suits their taste, when it suits them, okay? So that's something we should keep note of. Now, going back to what I was saying and understanding the importance of this. What I have seen is a lot of so-called Egyptian scholars and so-called individuals who practice the Kemetic way of life teach the ancient Egyptian religion, the Kemetic religion of Asar. And one of the things that they miss on both sides is that those who are of African origin or African Americans and those who are Egyptologists, white Egyptologists, the one thing they miss is that they teach these things from a very left-brain perspective. So you're not understanding it because you're not involved in the culture. Ma'at tells us to understand truth, you have to live it, okay? So when you don't apply the teachings to your daily life, you don't really understand what the ancient Kemetic people were saying and how they lived. And this is the problem that we have in today's world. When I was studying way back in the 80s and the 90s, and I was learning from a lot of different teachers. Some were Egyptologists, Dr. Ben Jamakinen, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Smalls, Dr. Booker T. And one of the things that I noticed that they were very adamant about their positions, which I understood, meaning that they taught that the information was stolen and then rewritten and whitewashed. But in teaching that information, and I'm not trying to, make them out to be wrong and villains, but I'm trying to just correct their wrong. In teaching the Kemetic way of life or the Kemetic information, they did exactly what the European archaeologists did. They just presented things in a very cold and dry facts and things like that. So if you don't have a cohesive culture that you're living, the information then is meaningless. And I've told individuals like this who go out and say, well, I'm taking my son or daughter out of school and what I want to do is homeschool them. And I said to them, well, if homeschooling means that you're just putting a black face on a white figure, then that's not good. And they're saying, well, we're just taking it back to its original complexion or what they originally looked like. I said, but then it's going to be a feel-good type of thing. Granted, you are absolutely right. If you look at what has been done in terms of the whitewashing and stealing of the ancient cultures, yes, you're right. But you have to live it. You have to put in place a culture, a way of life. If you don't do that, then what's going to happen to the very people you're trying to save from racism is that they're going to just mimic the current dominant culture of the white supremacists. You understand what I'm saying? And this is what I find that has happened today. When you see things like these meetings with the president, Kanye West, what is his name, Kanye? And meeting with Trump, and he says the most outrageous things. Well, we get a little bit of information, and suddenly people think they're powerful, but they're not living the information, and then there's a big disconnect, all right? And that's a problem, because right-brain people think integratively. So we don't separate living the information from studying it. That's very, very important to understand. So I want to then now take a look at this because this is very important. This here talks about the development of the two cultures and why it's important that when we're looking at the information, we're just not teaching it in a very cold, matter-of-fact, dry way. African people developed in a warm climate which gave rise to their melanated skin. This is what Neter, or God, put in place for those individuals to survive the hot climate. And with that also, they became right-brain thinkers, because right-brain thinkers is a congregative thinking process, meaning it tries to see union between things. It's synthesis. All right? Now, in Europe, where there wasn't enough sunlight, where the individual had to fight to survive and for food because of the cold climate, it was more about me, and not the collective. So therefore, they developed the left brain, and that left brain ruled their life, which is why you'll see in our society, in Western society today, it's all about individualism. And that goes directly back to that cold climate, because that's how you had to think. Whereas in Africa, food was plentiful. Everything was there. It was abundant. So you could share. You could think in terms of the collective. This is why the right hemisphere of the brain was fully developed to bring about integrative brain thinking. All right? Now, but let's take this further. We need to know something. Now, along with Akhenaten, Nefertiti's husband, came the idea that because they saw that they were writings, and there were also different drawings of them by the Kemetic people, they said that these were artistic representations of them. Because now we see that Akhenaten and Nefertiti have elongated heads. So that was a puzzle to the archaeologists. They were like, whoa, what is this? You know, so thus spawned a whole branch of science now, which talks about that they were aliens. That, well, you know, the reason they were able to build the pyramids and do all these fantastic things because they had to either be aliens or they had to be alien intervention. Do you understand what I mean? Which is totally, totally absurd, you know. But this serves two purposes. To them, it explains the elongated heads, which is, I'll go into that. It's actually something that has been done in African tradition for many, many years. So, but what more importantly, what it does is it takes away from African people the heritage and legacy of who they are or who they were as truly great people. All right, and that is something that they have been trying to do over the course of years. All right. So let's look at this. I want to just show you this here if I can get to it. Now we have a different rendition, okay? This is from the Daily Art. Here's the elongated head, okay? Now this perplexed them. They're like, what is this? Man, woman, or both? Meet Akhenaten, the only androgynous pharaoh, and, you know, whatever. Okay, elongated head. Now this is him, and I think this is either Nefertiti or one of his daughters. And they're paying homage to Aten, the sun, and these are the rays of Aten. Now, of course, you'll see his belly here and the elongated head. In the prognosticism here, you can see the protruding jaw. And same thing with this Nefertiti here, elongated jaw, okay? Now, as we go on, here's another rendition of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and this is their daughters here, okay? And we're still seeing the protrusion of the jaw, the elongated heads, okay? And this is Akhenaten, little beer belly there. Now, notice that this is him and Nefertiti, okay? And notice the hue. Over centuries, we still have the hue there, which is brown. And it's been lightened a bit due to erosion. And this is his wife. And notice that she's brown and not that pale white bust that we've seen unveiled on the news show. All right. Another rendition. Okay. Now let's take a look further. This is a bust here. Elongated head. Okay. Now, what do we see here? The art of skull elongation by the Mangbetu tribe in the Congo. Oh, whoa! Do you mean that the African people were practicing this? Yes, they were. They were practicing the elongated head. Yes. But now remember, the Egyptologists were telling us that these were aliens, or this was artist interpretation of that specific period. So hence we know that this has been an African tradition of the black Africans of the Congo. So when we go back to look, and we see them wearing the crown, the elongated head, we know that's an African tradition, not coming from Europe. Okay? Now, there was a scientist by the name of Chekhov Diop, right? And what he did, and I'm not going to go into this here, but I'd like to tackle the DNA results that they got, and I'm going to show you how they cherry-picked in terms of the DNA. Chekhov Diop actually did a test, not only of carbon dating, but DNA tests of the ancient Egyptian mummies, and what it showed that the melanin content in those mummies was clearly high, meaning that they were of darker skin complexion hue. But, of course, his work has been hidden and buried. It's on the peripheral because they don't want to put that out there for mass media. Now, you know, one of the things that we could wonder is that, well, why aren't, you know, individuals like, let's say, Tyler Perry, Oprah, Spike Lee, all these individuals, why aren't they making movies that show the ancient Egyptian people as they truly were of dark skin complexion? Well, the reason is because Hollywood would shut them down and basically end their careers if they did that. What you have to understand is that there are Egyptologists out there who know the truth, but cannot come out and publicly say it because they will either be ostracized, removed from their positions, or killed. Because this is so important that the ruling elite has to keep in place this lie. But why? Why is this lie so important to them that they would do anything to keep it going? And they've used Hollywood as their personal propaganda machine. Let's go and take a look at this. We have to understand what happened at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD with the Roman Emperor Constantine. What they did in that meeting was they rewrote the Bible. So they took it from the worship of of Mary to Jesus. So prior to that, most ancient African cultures had a very balanced perspective on life, but they did elevate the female principle, which is the moon cult. And the moon cult is also analogous to right brain thinking. And the sun cult is analogous to left brain thinking. And we've talked about how the two great civilizations developed, Africa and Europe, in terms of the hemispheres of the brain. Because you have to be dominant in one hemisphere of the brain. You know, it's very unlikely that a culture comes into just perfectly integrated brain thinking. So the ruling elite their plan was to capture the planet, to imprison the planet, to become the rulers of the planet. In order to do that, they had to take information away from the masses and hoard it for themselves. one of the things that they did was burn down the Library of Alexandria. If you don't know what that is, that was the storehouse of the world's knowledge. And it was burned down. Now, there's many theories of who did it. Some say it was the Christians. Some say Alexander the Great. Who knows? But what we do know is we have lost all of that information, that wealth of knowledge. Now, the reason that this was necessary, because ancient Kemet, Egypt, reached the zenith of civilization, the height of our knowledge at the time. Not only did they possess the knowledge of how to build the pyramids, but they possessed the knowledge of interdimensional travel, astral projection, communication with the dead, and more. So the oligarchy, the ruling elite at the time, was instrumental in bringing down ancient Kemet, Egypt, and hoarding the information and the knowledge. And one of the most important things that they had to do was transition the planet, the world, from a right brain integrated world to a left brain linear thought process. In doing so, it set the stage to bring in their religious doctrines, to bring in Christianity, to bring in Islam, to bring in Catholicism, to bring in Judaism, which are all taught from a left brain perspective, but more importantly, showed you that you were a sinner and that you had to rely on a savior or third person to save you. Whereas the ancient religions, specifically of Osiris Set, taught that you are God and that you have the power to save yourself. Now, the one thing, if you want to control the planet, that you don't want to do is have a bunch of gods and goddesses running around the planet, because then that ends your rule. So if you can transition the planet from a right brain thinking to a left brain thinking, meaning what? You tell people that the only thing that is real can be processed through the five senses. So if you cannot see, feel, hear, and taste it, it doesn't exist. So what consequently happens? You fear ghosts and spirits, you fear the dead, you fear the afterlife. You don't believe in astral projection. You don't believe in other dimensions and other realms. You don't believe in spirits. So they put in place all of these things to keep you from accessing your true power. Because as I said before, the last thing you want is a population of gods and goddesses roaming around. What happens? That ends your rule. So this is why when we're asking the question, well, what color were the ancient Egyptians and why does it matter? It matters because if you look at the state of the world today, where the number one targets on the planet, on every continent, is people of dark skin hue. Wherever you see them, you see oppression, you see depravity. The plan has been orchestrated to wipe them off the planet. Because if you don't wipe them off the planet, what will they do? They will create or re-energize that culture again. So they have to be target number one. Now, to the layman, the lay white person, they would believe, if they were to take a trip around the world and seeing the depravity that all people of color are in, they would say, well, people of melanin complexion aren't as intelligent as white people of European descent, because wherever I go, they're living in abject poverty. So why can't they pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Because there was a concerted effort to eliminate them from the planet, because they are right brain, integrated brain thinkers, and we cannot have that culture emerge again, because that would take the ruling elite off their position of power. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is why it is very important that when we're looking at the Metuneta, the hieroglyphics, that we don't just study it in a cold, matter-of-fact way, facts, figures, that we experience it through living the culture again. Because that will awaken the gods and goddesses within us, that will awaken the ancestors, and that will awaken the emerald tablets from Tehuti. And we will now begin to rebuild our civilization again. And this is a civilization for the entire world to benefit from. Because we are in a state of retardation. The progress has been stopped. And now with more studies, we're realizing that the calendar or the history that we have been taught is a lie. That what we call as the ancient primitive people may not have been primitive or ancient. And we're now beginning to realize that it may have been fairly recent that they existed. But we're told it was thousands of years ago. We're now beginning to realize that Atlantis may have been actually a real civilization instead of what many call as an allegory. Let me just take a moment here just to greet all of the Magi. Nikki Atepu, Oset, Harunefer, Mike Hatepu. Hey, Sigma Male Hatepu, how are you? And I want to thank Mike for your super chat. Much appreciated. So, I want you to think about that, consider that in order for us to truly awaken this knowledge and bring back the planet to the position of advanced knowledge and of peace, more importantly, peace, we have to start thinking integratively. We're not going to eliminate racism through a process of prosecuting those individuals who are responsible for it. Yes, that's a good step. But we have to transform the planet in the same way that the Conference of Nicaea did from that left brain thinking. We have to transfer it from left brain to right brain thinking. And when that happens, there will be a total overhaul and revolution that happens. But if we don't do that, then there's going to be this stalemate, and this battle will continue to go on and on and on. And make no mistake, the ruling elite has one objective: to totally control the planet and totally eliminate those individuals of dark skin, hue, complexion, so that this advanced civilization and way of life that we think happened thousands of years ago will never come to pass again. That is their objective. So with that, my beloved, I'm going to end this, and I'm going to let you guys know that I'll do a part 2 where I examine more into the DNA aspect of this. But don't forget to support us on Patreon so we can do more videos and ebooks and movies and cool stuff. And there's some exclusive videos on Patreon that we have done, which talks about rituals and building, like creating an amulet, a magical amulet, and things of that nature. So until my next broadcast, this is Kasank Ma Keperu, son of Tahuti and Ma'at and Amen Ra. And you know, give libations to the ancestors, okay? They are the ones that can help